Namaste, welcome. This is Thomas for Lighthouse Yoga, Tarot, and Astrology, as well as Outcast Astrology. Today is March 1st. It's actually 11/11. Tuesday, March 1st, 2022. And we are coming to you from Chicago, just a little north in Evanston, Illinois. So we are looking at Central Standard Time. And you can see the coordinates down in the lower left corner. I hope that's visible on your screen. If not, sorry about that. The screen might get cut off. But down at the very bottom, you get some coordinates, and there's also a toolbar down at the bottom, which we'll make use of in just a second. If you're not familiar with the program, it's called Stellarium, and I use this a lot as a chart of the heavens, and it is the accurate chart, so it's important not to get confused when we're talking about where the locations of the physical planets, the sun and the moon, are actually located with regard to the stars, and the Western system, the tropical system, where you're looking at a different interpretation of where the planets are located in the signs. So when we're looking here, this is more in line with what you would call Vedic astrology, sidereal astrology. If I had to put a name on what I try to filter all of this information through, it's more of a root system. Alchemical astrology would be rightly called. I'm currently reading a book that is talking about the traditions from Babylon and what we call the Hellenistic era, pre-Roman. So very interesting. I read books on astrology from Egypt, and all these interpretations are relevant and really amazing and wonderful, and I give homage and respect to all of those. So just to kind of put that there at the outset, I know some of you have seen some of these videos before, and I'm still hitting my stride with how they go and how to edit them. I wish I could put my face on the screen for you. That's not something I can do with the basic program that I'm running. I think if I go live on YouTube or on the social media, that's something that I'm able to do, but that'll come in time. So I appreciate you watching and bearing with me. Please share the video, subscribe to the channel, and I really appreciate your input. Please comment. I really appreciate, and I'd like to let this be a dialogue, because there's so much going on and there's so many different interpretations, and I think I like to look at things from all perspectives. It's one of the things that's brought me to astrology, is looking at the various systems from yoga, looking at the tarot, looking at all the Vedic information about how the body works through the chakras, the planetary associations with those chakras. It all comes back to astrology. So I, like some people, have been a reluctant astrologer, because I came through it through yoga. I was kind of brought up in the Catholic Church. I wouldn't say kind of, I was brought up in the Catholic Church, and astrology was definitely frowned upon. The fortune telling, all of that was taboo. And if I haven't gone through so much in my own life that has kind of directed me here, I wouldn't be here. But that's the way it's gone, and I'm excited to share what I found with you. So we'll get into what's going on right now, and that always allows us to jump off to other topics. So thank you for letting me share that. Thank you for your time. I'm going to pull up the toolbar down here at the bottom. So as I draw this up, when you're using the program, just kind of a sensory thing, you just move your cursor down. And I'm turning off the atmosphere, so that'll bring up the stars. And it's busy. So I'm going to leave the ground cover there for just a moment. You can zero the horizon, which gives you a really accurate reading of your ascendant if you're using this program to determine your own birth chart. Uh, you can make that horizon at the 0 line. It's really right at the top of that S. If you're watching this video, right at the top of that S, that's going to be the 0 point. This is just a composite image for the ground cover for now. But right now in the sky, so the sun is up, of course, but we've got the sun with Jupiter coming up into an exact conjunction shortly. The moon, likewise, will be conjunct the sun in just the next 24 hours over the next day or so. The exact time I'm not exactly sure, but I know it is March 2nd, so it looks like it's going to be midday from judging by the distance there. Midday our time anyway. Saturn and Mercury are conjunct, and you have Venus and Mars conjunct. So, the declination, as it's called, is the height of or the perceived height of the planets along the ecliptic. Right? So the sun defines the main line of the outer circle, right, as it extends from the Earth, and we call that the ecliptic. And the planets are kind of above or below that. And that also, we can use that to understand, how an eclipse happens. The moon, as it comes up toward the sun right now, is going to be below the sun. And when the moon shifts a little bit higher toward the ecliptic and those two cross paths, that's what happens when we get an eclipse. Consequently, the north node of the moon, which you could think of like the polar cap of the moon, and the south node of the moon, which you could think of like the southern polar cap or cup of the moon, right? And that's the north and south mode where they cross that ecliptic, and that's why where you get your eclipses based year to year is on those north and south nodes. So if that was over your head, don't worry about it. I hope I explained it in a decent way to those of you that did grasp that. But that's that I'm going to jump around as much as I can and share with you what I understand. So we'll pull up the constellation art, which when you go over here, it's over farther on the left, and this is what they call the Western version, which is a kind of composite mishmash of all these different styles of art. But you get these outlines, these beautiful outlines of the constellations. The imagery is not exact. If you want to look at the lines, you can look at the lines. That gives you kind of the polka dot connections where you see the traditional, the modern, I should say, the modern versions of the constellation lines. And that doesn't even designate the boundary. For the boundary, you have to click on the planet and see where it actually is. Click on the star and see in which constellation it's set. So that's really one of the best ways to figure out where the planet actually is. If it's really close to a star, click on the star and see where that star, in which constellation that star belongs to, and then you're going to get the most exact reading of where the planet actually sits. That's how they used to do it. Right, it was based on the stars, and then the constellations kind of came later. Speaking of the stars, in addition to all this that's going on, let me pull off these lines here. In addition to all this that's going on with the conjunctions, and again, the moon has just been sailing through here, we have Fomalhaut, which is the guiding star of Aquarius. And this is in the fixed air sign. This is one of the what are known as the fixed stars, and this is a confusion in astrology, and I'll just go over this really briefly. There are the fixed stars with respect to the planets, right? All the stars are considered to be fixed with respect to the movement of the planets, the sun and the moon. And then there are the fixed stars of the fixed cross, right? And of those, there are only 4 stars. Right? And the Fomalhaut is in the fixed sign, the fixed air sign of Aquarius. And you have Regulus opposite Fomalhaut down in Leo. You have Aldebaran in Taurus. And you have Antares in Scorpio. So the fixed signs, Scorpio and Taurus on the feminine axis, right, earth and water. And then on the masculine axis of that fixed cross, you have Aquarius and Leo, right? Aquarius air and Leo fire, of course. So Fomalhaut is in the sky, sort of going, overseeing all these changes, right? This is the venue, right? And this is I don't know why I just got this image, but I have to share it. There's I don't know. I grew up with the old movies, and there would be Western movies and just on TV, and there was always the card game, right? There was always the poker game, and some guy thought he won, right? Somebody thought they won, and they had the hand. They were the tough, the macho. They were the obvious, right? And they were pulling the chips, right? And they put down the hand, but because they didn't think that the new guy from out of town could win, right? Or would have the hand, right? Maybe even the big shot cheated, right? He was so sure there's no way, because he not only did he win, he cheated to win, so he was sure he won. But the royal flush, right? The full house, right, comes down, and that's Fomalhaut. So the newcomer, is there, and that's the winner, right? And that's the ultimate winner. And in that moment, no words are needed. You just put the cards on the table, and it is what it is, right? You got witnesses, right? And of course, the scene would go on. There were guns involved, and and there are guns involved. Right now, there are guns involved. So, March 1st, 2022. And there are always guns involved, and I hate to say that, but it's not just the current news cycle that there's strife and suffering and displacement of people and unpeace, right? So this is, I know it's always part of the polarity, but it's never easy to see, and it's never easy to see it to such a great degree, right? Especially among certain nations that have a lot of power, that have that that greatest of capabilities. So let's leave it there for now in terms of the political commentary. But this is all in reference to everything that's going on in the world. The great adage of the alchemists is as above, so below. Right? The Hermeticists, right? The ancient traditions. The understanding was what's happening in the heavens is what happens on the earth, and what happens on the earth is what's happening on the heavens. We understand the truth of the observer having an impact on what is observed, right? How you observe, in the way in which you observe, and sometimes it's necessary to withhold comment. But the way that we watch and how we watch and what we see has an effect on all of it, right? It's a two-way street. It's a communication. Right? I think human beings as a species are a kind of bridge, right? And in some ways, it's in need of repair. Right? We are as individuals, we've lost that connection. That there is a disconnect, and we need to rebuild that bridge back to understanding our connection both to the heavens and to the earth. Not a lot of people remember that in the center of your zodiac, your birth chart is the earth. Right? We put the earth in the center, and right now the sun is in Aquarius, which means that the Earth is in Leo, and we are opposite of Aquarius. So we are, beginning degrees of Leo. Is that correct? Did I say that right? So something to consider, right? Where's the Earth in the chart? Right? We are in Leo. Earth is always opposite. You look where the moon is, and the moon also coming into Aquarius. And the Earth is in Leo. So, all right, conjunction junction. What's that function? Right? Mars and Venus are hanging out together, right? Mars in Sagittarius, Venus in Sagittarius, and everybody's been talking about Pluto, right? Pluto is in Sagittarius. I know everybody wants to say it's in Capricorn, yada yada. Pluto is on its way into Capricorn in the sky, and that's important because what we're seeing now is Pluto exiting fire, and that mutable fire, right? Unstable fire, difficult fire, right? And it's going to be moving into the cardinal Earth, right? And that's not going to happen for another year, right? That's next February, I believe, the 13th, I think, if I'm not mistaken, February 13th. Pluto goes into Capricorn. Pluto will change signs. So when Pluto changes signs, that's going to be an interesting day or an interesting time, right? Pluto is really under the microscope because of its return position to what's commonly regarded as the chart for the United States. It's like we have a Saturn return. Some people will get even a Uranus return. You gotta live a while, but you can get that. Mars, you get Mars return constantly, right? But the Saturn return is the big one, and then you see these, over long-term charts like of a nation, right? You'll get a Pluto return every 280, 290 years, and the significance of that is, in some ways, what we're seeing, what we're living through, what we're all experiencing on a collective level. So it's really important to breathe because the Mars and Venus, right, these personal planets, right, they're working with Pluto, and they're bringing that the issues of our instincts and our hearts, right, from the subconscious, right, and there's a tremendous force that comes up when we experience that as in the conscious mind, right, or we don't know where things are coming from. The dream state is tremendously active, right? All these kinds of coincidences happen constantly, right? Because the subconscious is trying to communicate to you, right? And it has this fuel from Mars. It has the air and the earth from Venus, right? And it's able to do a lot with that, right? I don't know why I always think about the mutable fire of Sagittarius as being like a forge, like there's such heat there that it can mold things, right? That it's a time of transformation. It liquefies things, right? One of my favorite teachers, she calls it the lake of fire, right? And I don't know, maybe that's a good image to stick with. So Venus and Mars are going to continue to travel together for another little bit, and then Mars is going to come into Capricorn in the next few days. And when Mars comes into Capricorn, Mars is in what's called exaltation. And that means that Mars is kind of heralded and raised to an even greater capability than it normally has. And that Mars in Capricorn will be tremendously effective, right? This is a time to make use of uh, your inner drives, right? Your instinctive powers, right? Um, listen closely inward, right? Measure the energy that's coming from the root chakra, right? There, it is part of that fight or flight mechanism, right? That root chakra. It is part of, it is triggered by fear, right? And it is tremendously soothed um, by, what we could call pleasure, right? Or, goodness. Um, so we want to be able to try to find a balance between that that fear instinct, right? Not give in to fear, but also measure the amount of pleasure that we're providing ourselves, that we don't get carried away. Right? I'll leave that there. That sounds good enough. Um, it's not like me to want to give advice. I don't like to give advice, and I know sometimes when interpreting the planets and their positions, it sounds like it's giving advice, like well, trying to find a balance, right? Okay, maybe I should try to find a balance. And trying to find a balance, it sounds like such generic advice, because we're always trying to find a balance, right? And that's always true, and we understand the duality of all of this, right? That there's a duality to Mars, right? And we can overindulge, we can underindulge, right? We don't give enough, right? Mars gets restless, angry, right? We don't have enough uh, stability, or we don't have enough action, right? We don't give Mars, Mars has to do something, right? I mean, I think about that with regard to all the video games, right? Um, all the violent movies, right? Incredibly, um, visceral, right? All your senses are involved, so graphic, right? Everything is, and we need that, I think, somehow as human beings, because we used to be involved in, treacherous situations, right? Our survival depended on, us being alert and using all of our instincts. And in many ways, we don't need to do that in modern society. And so that need to, you know, play those video games, to, you know, I don't know, watch the violent movie. Um, it's a vicarious release. We get to play shoot 'em up without anybody actually getting hurt, right? Um, but instead, what we seek, instead of playing the video games, we seek, a richness in our life. Right? We seek a way that we want to live a little bit more vibrantly in the moment. Right? Not that the moment is all there is. Right? Planning for the future can also be kind of a scary thing. Can also, trigger some of our fear impulses. And that's a good thing. When we feel something new, when we're going into new territory, we're cautious, and we have a respectful approach to what's happening in front of us. But we can do that with our own life, instead of, not that we're going out and doing things that are harmful or violent, but we're living on an edge, um, of challenging ourselves, of seeking out new projects, new ideas, new experiences, ways to deepen our practice. When we talk about our yoga practice, the horizons are endless. Right? There's always more to explore. Right? That's one of the things that's so beautiful. The pose is never the same twice. Anybody that's been practicing for long enough will tell you that it always shows up a little bit differently. There's always something that you can understand and refine. There's always something that, maybe you get an injury, and you have to approach the injury through the pose, and that gives you a whole other experience. And we're seeking that richness of life, rather than um, trying to just have these, really extreme experiences through, again, whatever it is. Um, Video games, movies. Right. So we'll move on to Capricorn and Saturn and Mercury. Um, I've been thinking a little bit more about Saturn and Mercury because initially I was thinking like, Saturn is going to boss Mercury around, and Saturn is the big shot, and Mercury is the messenger, and Mercury is just going to spin around and around. And this Saturn Mercury conjunction, I really feel like it's um, it's it's Mercury being used in perhaps the best possible way. Um, I think Mercury represents communication, represents commerce, right? All forms of exchange. So that involves money, right? A lot of times we attribute money to Venus and Taurus, and I think that's true in some ways, but I think that's more, Venus is more possessions, like the things that we have versus the money to get those things. Um, that's the way I distinguish it. So Mercury is the means, right? It's the means of exchange. It's our words, it's the throat chakra, right? And Mercury is how we communicate. And again, that's often through money. Um, and this is really judicious use of those means of exchange. So Saturn is in its home sign of Capricorn, and even if you want to put it in the Western tradition, Saturn, it rules Aquarius, is co-rules Aquarius with Uranus, right? So Saturn and Mercury are right there together, and there's a there's a very careful use of the means of exchange, and again, you could say it's you know being used um, to deceive, right? You can say that it's being used, but I think it's for the best possible way. I think somehow Saturn is using Mercury, um, for the highest possible good. And I say all that because what's happening with the Sun and Jupiter over in Aquarius is that the Sun is kind of blocking Jupiter. The Sun takes the cake, right? The Sun is in a chart, it's the most important thing in the chart. And when you're looking at, okay, uh, the ascendant and the moon, I grant you, but when you have the Sun right pretty much on top of Jupiter like it is right now, and will be in the next couple days, going across. In alchemy, we call that combust, and that means that the Sun or Jupiter is combust the Sun, which means combustible, explosive, right? And Jupiter is uh, debilitated basically. Jupiter is the Sun overpowers Jupiter, so Jupiter is not able to function like it normally will function, and you could say the Sun takes a little bit of that energy and is able to use some of that energy and channel it in a certain way. But again, Jupiter, it's not able to express itself. I want to say the way it normally expresses itself, but I want to say it's not really able to express itself at all. Because if it does, it's going through the Sun. And the Sun is going to, it's mostly the Sun. It's mostly, uh, you know, that brightest mind. Right? It's blinding light. Okay. Um, let's go forward. So we'll use the program a little bit. Use the program a little bit here to fast forward in time. So again, March 1st, there's the 2nd. So this is just about noon tomorrow. And we'll go forward a little bit, minute by minute. So we're about noon 30, right? Noon 15. The moon will cross the sun. Right? you can see the moon. I mean, you see the sky moving, right? But you can see the moon. It's kind of in the knee, in his knee. This is again 11:30. It's gonna go. It's already. You can see it transiting. Right? Starting to move away from his knee and into the flow, right? The Aquarius is the water bearer, and that's why it's so confusing, because people always say Aquarius is a water sign, right? But we remember it's fixed air. So you could have been watching as I was clicking those minutes by, right? You can also see Mercury transiting Saturn, right? Mercury is moving so fast right now. Mercury is gonna zoom and catch up with the sun, right? So we can see that day by day. It's big jumps here. The sun crosses Jupiter, right? All right. So this is what's happening. This is what is taking place right now in the day sky. And it's worth noting that if this was a chart, if this was a chart coming down for somebody that we made a chart for, all these planets, they would be, above, the ascendant. They would be on the top half of the chart. Right? This is a very expressive chart, and it's helpful to remember that, an outwardly expressive chart. It's helpful to remember that this is all taking place in the daytime, right? When the sun is up. All these planets are with the sun. You can see Mars and Venus in the morning, but you really can't see any of the other planets. Saturn and Mercury, Jupiter, of course, you cannot see. Right now, you can't see the moon. But in the early morning hours, you can catch Mars and Venus together. It's really beautiful, just gorgeous. But you got to get up, got to get up early. But again, all these other planets in the sky, right, during the day. So, in so many ways, again, the sun is shining and so brightly that we're not able to see all of this clearly, right? This accounts for, the fact that we want to be sure. So many of us, we want to be sure of something, and it's really not possible right now. It's much more helpful to focus on the things that you, in some ways, can be sure of, which is you and the people that are around you, your family members, your coworkers, the people that you interact with on a daily basis, even if they're not physically around you, how you interact with those people. That's what you can control. You can't control the outer, bigger events, and because we have the information constantly at our fingertips, we think we can. We think we can control those outer, bigger events, or that we should be able to control them, or that we have some kind of direct say in what's happening. It's great to express how you feel and have a say, and that's of course what I'm doing here. I'm sharing what I see and sharing how I understand what's going on. And again, you can look at these symbols in the sky, and you can get a sense of what's happening, but it's not possible to understand exactly. Um, you know, there's so many moving pieces. I have tremendous sympathy for the people that are attempting to control what's happening, and I mean like those heads of state, the people that are trying to steer the ship, right? I whether they're positive players or negative players, you know, there's garbage on every side of the aisle. Um, the whole thing is is a lot of theater. I mean, I grew up that was the way that my parents and many people regarded politics. They regard it as political theater, like all of it was political theater. And um, that's helped me to understand so much and keep my calm when I see things that I'd otherwise be outraged by. That there's so much of it is theater, so much of it is posturing and grandstanding and, um, you know, overblowing mountains out of molehills. It's it's hyperbolic commentary statements every single day, right? And certain things, unfortunately, they make us feel good when if we choose sides and our side notches a win, that gives us an inflated sense of self. And if our side notches a loss, we have to defend that deflated sense of self, which ultimately strengthens our sense of our that attachment to that side of ourselves that is connected to that team or that side. And that's really difficult because that just strengthens our attachment to all of these things that we would say are ego run, that are division run, um, that are an us versus them dichotomy, rather than you know something that's going to be supportive of all sides. It's not that there can't be sides. It's just that those sides continuously warring with each other um, doesn't seem to be sustainable. It doesn't seem to be in harmony with the way that the world works, with the way the earth works. We've denied so much of our humanness. Again, that bridge that I was speaking about earlier has been so eroded that we've lost that connection, and we're being almost forced to return back to those connections. Um, so that's what Pluto is all about. That's what Pluto is doing here. That's what Pluto is here for. Pluto is reminding us of our humanness. I was listening to Rick Levine the other day, and he was reminding us that the the aspect of Pluto as the ruler of the underworld, Pluto, Hades, uh, the underworld, hell, if you will, right? It's part of that archetype. Um, is also the ground that grows things, right? We bury our dead, and we also bury seeds, and that same underworld process is what grows new life. And so that underworld process is necessary for new life to grow, and we've stifled that uh, so tremendously, or we've denied the necessity for that process, that aspect of the process. Um, you know, in my own life, I've been to many funerals, and it's all very sterilized. Um, Almost immediately when somebody passes, the body is removed, and uh, there's very little in the modern Western society uh, awareness around the body of a dead person, right? And that's you know and that's part of the denial of death, right? And then this creates, as Freud talks about, he talks about perversions of death, right? Love of death, right? We become obsessed with certain death impulse because in many ways we have to, and that's this calling back into balance that, the whole cycle is necessary, beginnings and endings, right? Many of us, we want constant beginnings, begin, start, and we rarely finish things, and that lack of finish is, again, it's a fear of an ending, it's a fear of a death, right? And then if we fear it, we suppress it, and we put the lid on it, and at some point it bubbles and boils over. So let this be a reminder, that we understand the cycle as a whole, and that there's so much beauty in that when we look at that whole cycle, rather than simply regarding the part of the cycle that we prefer. We look at the zodiac. There are these 12 sections, these 12 constellations, and the planets move through, and it's a complete system. Everything has its place, everything has its home, everything has its balance, everything has its opposite, and they work in perfect harmony as the circle turns. Sometimes it appears that things are out of whack, and many might say that things seem like they're out of whack right now. But it's important to remember that this out of whackness is necessary to bring us back into whack. If it was out of whack, we got to be in whack, I guess. So let's come back to whack. Who knows where that came from? When I was a kid, we would say everything was whack as a bad thing. That's whack. That's not good. And so, like they say, everything is upside down and backwards. So let's bring it back into whack, back into balance. All right, my friends, we'll leave it there. It's plenty long. 40 minutes goes by like nothing. Thanks for letting me share. If you've made it this far, thank you so much for listening.